Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Almut Van Casteren. I'm the CEO of eProd Solutions. And I would like to thank you all to join us today, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's webinar around the EU Global Gateway and your supply chain about policy, compliance, and digital solutions. As you all know, the East African fresh produce and avocado sector in general, and more specifically, is changing. On one hand, there's a lot of global demand for our avocados. At the same time, the European markets are hungry for high quality and sustainably produced fruits, and there's a lot of opportunity for growth. On the other hand, the rules are actually changing. Just a few years ago, as an exporter, you could export avocados or any other fresh produce relatively straightforward through documentation and logistics. Today, there are more and more regulations coming up, like the EU Deforestation-Free Regulation, like the CSRD on sustainable standards, Global Gap, organic, and many more. And these standards have fundamentally reshaped what means to be an exporter. It's not just a minor compliancy issue, it's actually really essential. And without all these standards, you simply risk that your fruits or vegetables do not reach European shelves anymore. Now, what does it mean? For many of you, probably it means like another regulation, another cost, more headaches. But then out of our experience as eProd, while working with hundreds of aggregators in Africa, we know that those aggregators who are successful today are not necessarily those who view compliance as a burden. It's more those who see compliance data as a strategic asset. So let's just look into the EUDR and what it requires. It demands that you know your farmers, that you map your fields, that you have done your legality checks with your farmers, that you have mapped the fields, that you do your additional due diligence, you run your deforestation-free analysis, traceability, record keeping, lot management, and so much more. It is a headache, so it requires traceability from the field and the farm all the way to the final client. Now, here's the paradox. The exactly same data is not only required for the EUDR, the exact same data is required by the regulators for other standards. It is required by banks if they want to de-risk lending for you as a company, but also for your farmers. It is required by international buyers, and you can use that actually to negotiate prices and to access new markets. It's required for carbon projects. It's required for so much more. In other words, what I think is compliance data is not necessarily at cost. It is actually a collateral. So what does it mean? If you can prove that your supply chain is clean and traceable and also sustainable, you can actually unlock different things simultaneously. You can unlock market access for European buyers, for example, and it's not only European buyers, international buyers all over the world are requiring more and more standards. So access to market, and you will get premium prices for your products as you have verifiable traceability information. Access to finance, banks will lend you money, but also to your farmers because you can de-risk their portfolio, and also more efficiency. So from reducing waste, post-harvest losses, to improving farmer relationships, growing your farmer and production base, to streamlining of your operations. So this is, amongst others, what we want to discuss with you today. We have 3 different speakers. So firstly, we have Dr. Christoph Zipfel. He's the program director at GIZ, and he will share with us the EU and donor perspective. Christoph will introduce the Global Gateway, and more importantly, and this is important, he will share with us how GIZ is planning to work with aggregators going forward. And very special today is Christoph is here not to lecture you, but actually to listen. He wants feedback and understand how GIZ could still fine-tune their programs better to match your actual needs. So I would like to really encourage you to be honest, to share your challenges so they can also understand where they can come in. Second, I will briefly walk you through eProd's approach. I think many of you know us already, so I'm not going to do it for long, just for the ones that don't know us yet. We as eProd are not a compliance software company. We actually have a supply chain intelligence platform. So our job is to capture this critical first mile data that is a foundation upon which everything else is built. So this post-my data that can then provide clean and verifiable digital records basically for the companies. And then we are here also with Almut from Cargo Ledger. He will show you the endpoint. So Cargo Ledger specializes in logistics and supply chain visibility. And he will not only demonstrate how Cargo Ledger seamlessly integrates into the eProd data to create an unbroken chain of custody. He will basically show you the chain of custody all the way from the farm to the European port and the final client. So this means that you could have a unified end-to-end solution. So before we head over to Christoph, I just want to emphasize a few things. We have over 100 people signed up to this webinar. So I think quite a few will still join us. This is why we muted you all. Doesn't mean that we will not listen. We would like you to contribute, put your comments into the chat. And at the end of the webinar, we will then go through your questions or comments and address them one by one. At the same time, we will also share a link in the chat box where we would request you to put any information that you would like to have from any of us in it so we can reach out to you after the webinar. Now, having said that, let me introduce you again, Christoph. Dr. Christoph Zipfel is a senior expert at GIZ, as I mentioned already. He has a deep experience in trade facilitation and also agriculture value chains. And he's here to share with us the Global Gateway Initiative and to get your feedback and insight on how GIZ can better support your journey towards compliance. Over to you, Christoph.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction and the kind words. So my name is Christoph Zipfel, as I said before. I'm the program director for the economic development cluster here at GIZ out of Nairobi. So I think most of you know GIZ. It's like the development agency from the German government implementing the work from German government, but also increasingly also from other donors and including the European Union. So we basically work on 4 areas here in Kenya. Let me just very briefly outline them, and then I will focus on scaling Global Gateway, which is the focus for today. So we're working on vocational training. That's an important angle for us also to upskill the talents in Kenya with a dual TVET approach that we've implemented together with the Kenyan government. Secondly, we're working on digitalization. I think that's also a great linkage to the work that Almut is doing. Also, we're focusing mainly on policy work, but also on implementing and supporting the digital talents here in Kenya. And thirdly, we're working on private sector development, working with smaller and medium-sized enterprises in increasing their competitiveness and embedding them in local and national supply chains. And lastly, we're working on trade, and that's basically also the focus for today. And we are trying to link the trade topic together with private sector upskilling and digitalization and bring this together. So today I will talk about Global Gateway and how we work as GIZ with Global Gateway. I will talk briefly about the EU Economic Partnership Agreement, which forms the basis for the trade relationships between Kenya and Europe. And then give a little bit highlight on the Global Gateway where it currently stands. I mean, that's still a moving target, and I think some things are really also in the shaping together with the EU as we learn more about. But it's the new and really the upcoming kind of framework for creating also the way for trade and with the European Union. So quite important to have an understanding. And then lastly, I will share with you just an outline of a new project we are about to kickstart beginning of next year together with the European Union and focusing specifically on the horticulture sector and how we can support the horticulture sector here in Kenya to form linkages and facilitate trade with the European Union. So let me just go to the next slide. So that slide kind of shows a bit on the Economic Partnership Agreement that has been signed in 2024. I think important for you maybe to note is that 60% of Kenya's agriculture exports are already currently with the European Union. So the EU is really the main trading partner for Kenya in the agricultural sector, and this is growing, as we can see. So just from Germany perspective, as I'm from GIZ, so what are the top 3 areas? It's cut flowers, plants. I think that not very surprisingly. Also coffee, tea, spices, and fruit and nuts. So we're working here on the horticulture sector and processed food. So the trade volume is currently, as it stands, at 450 million euros, which is still not very big. I mean, there's a big room for improvement, and that's why we're also putting up that program to improve that. I think what is encouraging is if you can see the year-to-year growth, which is currently 23%. I think for many of the Kenyan companies that we work with and we discuss with, it's like many of them are also fed up with also the uncertainty of other markets in terms of trade regulations, and they are eyeing much more on the European market with a reliable partner, with the economic partnership agreement as the basis, and not so much challenges in terms of trade barriers and so forth, even though we all know about the compliance topics that Almut mentioned, which is also poses some challenges for you. But I mean, that's something also we are happy together with Almut and the team and others to help you to overcome those challenges. So in a nutshell, the EPA is we see it taking off not only in the agri space, but also in other sectors. For instance, we are also working in the textile sector, and there's a huge interest also in the textile industry here in Kenya to increase the trade with the European Union. And we also see a trend towards higher quality processed products instead of pure raw material or commodities. So moving away from just exporting avocado, but looking also at value addition within the country for avocado oil, for instance, or also with the same goes for vegetables in terms of dehydration opportunities that we see there. So that's kind of the idea to focus on both the raw materials and the raw products, the commodities, but also on higher value processed products. So having said this, I will move on now to the Global Gateway, basically as a platform for working together with the European Union. As I mentioned before, the Global Gateway has been around for quite some time, but it just very recently really kicked off, I would say, right? So it started in 2024. And now I think it starts with the next phase that they're already discussing. And this will be basically the framework where most of the funding from the EU will be channeled through, right? So with the Global Gateway, the EU places a stronger focus and emphasis on aligning actions with their own economic and geopolitical interests. I think that's, you will see that a bit more when we look at the investment hub, which is a new instrument that was just recently introduced by the EU that shows very clearly both the work that we get funded through the EU should be helpful for Kenya, but also should be helpful and in the interest of the EU. I think that's kind of the narrative, right? So, which you hear not only from the EU, but also basically from any donor you will be likely to work with going forward. So what's good for Kenya, what's good for country X, Y, and Z. So that's the narrative we are working under. And they focus on strategic trade corridors. I mean, here in Kenya, particularly the northern corridor going through Kenya and linking the Kenya with East Africa. So that's something we are also supporting as GIZ in terms of the Northern Corridor office in Mombasa, in terms of the deal pipeline, in terms of infrastructure and so forth. So that's another area I won't focus too much today, but that's also a key area that falls under a Global Gateway. It focuses on critical raw materials and key value chains also such as the agri-business area. So it's basically the idea to bring together Kenyan private sector with the European private sector and form trade linkages or investment linkages or form strategic partnerships. And you see the very big number, 400 billion. I mean, I don't know exactly how they calculate this, but it shows just very much how serious the EU is about the Global Gateway, and they channel most of their money through this mechanism of Global Gateway. And an instrument that falls under Global Gateway that has just been recently introduced end of last year, it's called Global Gateway Investment Hub. So it was launched in October 2025. And that's basically the idea how to align the platform across Team Europe to bring together EU institutions, member states, financing partners to advance bankable infrastructure and value chain investments. And it's basically the idea to link to financing. There is some financing also available through the Global Gateway Investment Hub, but it's also there are financing institutes, CFIs, that are very much linked to the investment hub that helps you also find the right financing partner at good conditions, right? And the Team Europe governance model is in a way set up that the team nationals, they like here in Kenya, that's the team national, they anchor and pre-screen the projects at the country level, and then the hub in Brussels then consolidates and prioritizes and coordinates them at EU level. And GIZ is also one of the team nationals, so any also investment opportunities can also be channeled through GIZ together with the EU, and then brought to forward at Brussels, where it can be then screened and hopefully selected for further support through Global Gateway investment. So what does the support of Global Gateway investment entail? Basically, it has two components. It has financial support through Global Gateway Investment Hub, and also very importantly, the non-financial support that is also outlined here on the right-hand side of the slide. So in terms of financial support, there are grants available for commercial due diligence, for feasibility studies, for project preparation. So they are around, I think, 200 to 300,000 euros, usually the size of those grants, to just help kickstart the programs. The investment hub can also help with financial matchmaking in terms of loan equity and guarantees to provide support with, as I said, the DFIs and other financial institutions that the EU is linking up with, and helping also with guarantees, political risk coverage, and other local currency solutions. So that's the financial support. When we talk with large investors, I mean, it's great to get this financial support, especially on the grant level, but usually they have the part of financing, loan equity, and guarantees under their control. So I think equally important is the non-financial support by the European Union, the political support, economic diplomacy through the EU kind of governance and the EU support. It's also the dialogue with the Kenyan government through the EU that help also unblock challenges that might exist there, and also technical assistance. And that's basically where then GIZ will also come in through the joint work that we're doing with Global Gateway. And I will come a bit more into detail about what we are planning in terms of technical assistance through the Global Gateway, and then also some kind of upfront coordination and identification of European partners. Because I mean, important for the Global Gateway Investment Hub is that there must be some kind of investment or involvement of a European partner. So that comes back to this kind of win-win, what's good for Kenya and also what's good for Europe. So there should be a European partner. It doesn't need to be only the European partner. It can be also a consortium of different players also coming in from different countries. But at least there must be one European partner. Otherwise, you will not be eligible to tap into this kind of framework of Global Gateway Investment Hub. And that's basically the last slide on the Global Gateway Investment Hub that shows a little bit on the priority criteria that, I mean, they will look into when they see some proposals to support through the Global Gateway Investment Hub. So the priority sectors, they are around transport, as I mentioned in the beginning, infrastructure, especially from the farm to the port, and then ideally to the also to Europe. So it goes all the way right from the farm to the wholesaler, probably in Europe. Then energy climate is an important aspect also that we look into, digital health, and here most importantly the agri value chains. Important is also the area of values and standard, the ESG points. So I mean, as Almut mentioned, it's not only an additional headache for you, but also it gives you access to finance if you're adherent to ESG criteria. And also for the Global Gateway, they look at very clearly into ESG, environmental, social, and just good governance and transparency standards, that application of internationally recognized standards. I mean, but those things are, I mean, also important if you really want to export to Europe, right? So I mean, that you kind of most likely have them already in place, or if you don't have them in place, you're almost there, and we can help you get the last mileage to close them. So there must be some kind of project sponsor headquartered in the European Union. And then the project size, overall project size, so very ambitious at the moment. So it's about 10 million. My sense is they will lower the threshold because they are having a bit of a challenge to get enough investment proposals that hit that project size. But I mean, also, I think it's not that you need 10 million euros right now, but it can be also a trajectory, like you plan to grow your business over the next years. And in the end, you might have an investment volume that comes close to 10 million. But my understanding is also, talking to the EU quite a lot, that they might lower that threshold from 10 million downwards, because there are not so many investments, unless you're talking about infrastructure investments. But I mean, coming from private sector investments, 10 million is quite a big number, right? So Therefore, I think you should not be scared too much by that big number. I think important is it should be at least, in my view, something above like 2-3 million. Otherwise, that whole process is also too lengthy and too probably difficult, and doesn't make sense to tap into that if you just need investments below 1 million euro, right? So that's, I think, just also to look into really ambitious, large projects that want to scale, right? And that's, I think, my take on that project size. And then financial requirement, there must be also 10% coming from the company of the total investment volume. And then also clearly also the development policy added value, which I also highlighted that it must be in the interest of the partner country, which I think is not an issue. We talk about those sectors that we talked about here today on agri-value chains and also export to Europe. So from the global gateway, I will now come to our project that we are shaping up at the moment. So we are having what is called government-to-government negotiations, where this will be finalized and also hopefully commissioned next month in June between the Kenyan government and the German government. And we're also hoping to close our discussions with the EU by end of this year latest. So we are planning to start this, as I said, in Q1 next year. And that's basically already quite clear in terms of the program objectives and also the focus value chains. I think there might be some of the products that might be added, but that you see from the focus value chains is very much around the horticulture sector, right? So which I think most of the products you're probably working with. And in terms of the program objectives, it's about increasing competitiveness of the Kenyan agri-industry. We said agri-industry because we are looking at larger companies here. And also helping them to increase the competitiveness through improved quality, scaling, and also logistics. And then the second important point is really expand export, and that's the center of the program, to expand the exports to the EU, while also unlocking value addition opportunities. And I mentioned that in the beginning, in terms of dehydration, for instance, also value addition to any other of those commodities. That is very much also the focus, and that's also where probably some investments will come in, and that's also something where we're happy to support. A third angle, and that's, I guess, also relevant to my next speaker, to Cargo Ledge, is to reduce the carbon footprint by a modal shift, right? So basically a modal shift away from air freight, where most of the products are currently shipped to the European Union, to have more products shipped to the European Union through sea freight. And we all know about the challenges, but we are eager to invest and also innovate this together with freight companies, also together with the private sector companies to find solutions and pilot them. That's also where some funding will go into to provide and promote a sustainable and low carbon export pathways in the Northern Corridor that I mentioned before. So what exactly are we going to do in terms of GIZ, our support packages? There are 4 support packages we are currently working on and streamlining them together with our partners, with the EU. So the first one I mentioned already, that falls very much in line with the Global Gateway Investment Hub. So what EU needs is a pipeline of bankable investments. And we help the EU and we help also Kenya to develop that pipeline, not only start the pipeline, but also help from the beginning of the pipeline through investment readiness support, in investment memorandum, financial matchmaking, commercial due diligence. So the whole package basically you need for investment support to kind of close the deal and get the investment through your door. The second is about the value addition points, right? So, but also on the improved quality, right? So what we help also the businesses to improve technical production, management, also gaps in business analysis and increase productivity, and also link also the Kenyan SME partners with the European partners, and also help also Kenyan SMEs to link with larger agri-businesses, agri-industry, to make them also feasible also to export to the European Union. So to develop local supplier linkages and thereby diversify the supply chains. The third point is very pragmatic, very practical. We need to create market access. We need to get the Kenyan companies in contact and with buyers in Germany, in the European Union. From GIZ, we will probably focus most of our activities to Germany, which is the largest economy also in the European Union. But if there are other European companies also, we are also happy to support that. but really to the large supermarket chains that are have an interest in diversifying their supply chain, creating trade fairs, buyer desks, matchmaking, and really bringing together those actors and hopefully form then buyer contracts. Lastly, also on this part falls the support to the Ministry of Trade, the State Department of Trade, to further also implement the Economic Partnership Agreement, which has been in place for 2 years. But there might be some challenges and bottlenecks that you as a private sector company might run into. And we can bring this up to the attention then of the PS and CS level and try to unblock those policy challenges, very specifically to this value chain. So I think from our experience, it's more effective to be very specific on value chains in terms of policy support and advice and not being general, because then you can really unlock that particular challenges. And the last point is about infrastructure. And that very much comes back to now develop those solutions, pilot those solutions in terms of that modal shift. And we will do that also with our partners, companies also working with the EU. And that's basically this multimodal transport solution under the Northern Corridor. So as I said, we start this. We are in the final stages of getting this through the government-to-government negotiations. We will be having a business day also happening in Berlin on 24th of June, where we invite a handful or 2 handfuls of Kenyan companies to already kickstart that kind of market access, matchmaking between Kenyan and German companies, and get a sense and a feel of how this flies and what are the challenges also from both sides. And then we will finalize the discussions and start in Q1 next year. So that's basically the end of my presentation. So very happy and open to any questions you might have. I mean, there you see my contact details here. My email address, Christoph from Zipfel at giz.de. So, and with that, I will hand back to Almut. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christoph. That was very, very insightful. Yeah, so I think whatever you mentioned, like the requirements, it seems to really focus everything on environmental compliance, social, good governance, traceability, standards. So I think this is really the way to go. And I would like to now connect basically the theory that you just mentioned to something more practical tools that can help companies to make this happen. And I will start now briefly talking about eProd and what we do through first mile data collection from that forms the foundation to then handing over to Bjarne to take over. Let me share my screen with you. Please remember, ask questions. Put them into the chat box and make sure that whatever challenges you have, or you put it there, because Christoph is here also to still collect ideas or insights and basically what he needs for his project to conclude. So many of you probably know eProd already. We offer supply chain management ERP for the agriculture sector. So I mentioned this agricultural intelligence that we can basically promote. And we have a tool. We work traditionally with companies that have hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of farmers and need to manage their daily operations. Our system comes off the shelf. It's a platform that can easily integrate into different platforms. So we believe in interoperability, whether it's connectivity with hardware like scales and printer, or quality measurement devices, or soil testing equipment, or feed, depending on the value chains, whether it's with financial institutions for payment and loans, or whether advisory or other advisory services, just to mention some. Our system has been designed for low bandwidth environments. So our mobile application that you can see here on the right is Android-based and runs fully offline in the field for whatever data collection you need, while the desktop is hosted in the cloud. It has the data hosted in the cloud, which means you can access it from Berlin if you are one of the lucky ones to join Christoph to Germany in June next month, or anywhere else in the world to just access data, analyze it, process it. So there's a lot of data intelligence that we generate through the use of our system, and it creates insights for our clients, but not only for the clients, also for different sector stakeholders. As a company, we are in over 30 different sectors. Horticulture, tree crops, etc. are only some of them. We've implemented a system with many more than 250 partners, mainly in Sub-Saharan Africa. We probably registered more than 1 million farmers by now through our partners, and we keep on growing. So what is it that we do? We work with you as our clients, with agribusinesses, and we help you to digitalize your supply chain, starting with registration of farmers, registration and mapping of fields, to digitalizing contracts, so you can electronically ask the farmers to sign the contracts, can implement training programs, create awareness about these different standards that are out there, implement these standards themselves, so integrate with EUDR, with CSRD, with Global Gap, with Organic, you name it, share information with the farmers on agricultural challenges, weather forecast, pest and disease, logistics, and manage all your financial transactions. That starts with access to finance. So either you yourself as a company can manage that from your own balance sheet, or you simply integrate it with financial institutions who then could take over this part. Then aggregate from farmers, pay them based on the quality through mobile money, through bank transfer, through cash where needed, integrate with crop insurance packages and more. Now, why do our clients invest in something like eProd? It's often because the market demands traceability, transparency, and trust, and it's always coming back to that. We just heard also Christoph talking about that. And also because you need data for sharing. The EUDR, without data, you will not be able to export anymore. You need to share data for the due diligence statement with your buyers in Europe, and without that, you will not have any access to the European market anymore. And internally, the system will help you to manage quality, have accountable systems in place, and just to strengthen your supply chain. With many companies that have scaled their production and the number of farmers from just a couple of hundred to then into the thousands. So the system helps you to create comprehensive farmer profiles, including demographic information and tax numbers for the Kenyan companies under us. That's important. We can soon integrate with the KRA system to automatically generate the ETIMS invoices from the farmers, which helps you now to become compliant with KRA systems. You have planting information, past production, payments, loans, and so much more. The system is organized like with the farmers at the bottom. Farmers can have multiple crops. Farmers often are organized in farmer groups, irrigation schemes, villages that can form part of a production area or cooperative. Multiple cooperatives can then form part of a union or an aggregator or some bigger sort of a window. Quality and traceability is important, and yeah, we cannot emphasize it enough. It starts with the right inputs. It starts with management of field activities, recording everything that has been applied. Then aggregation from linking the product to a specific field, to a specific batch and lot throughout the processing to make sure that you have a fully traceable supply chain from the farm to the collection center to maybe a storage hub to then in-house processing and export and onward, but that is something also that Jaima is going to talk about. So data collection, our system happens on an Android phone. I mentioned that already here, a couple of screenshots. On the left, you have a farmer profile with all demographic information. Then in the middle, you have a farmer field, and on the right, you have now the aggregation or the buying page of our system. And that goes pretty intuitive. Then you can, through the system at the moment of buying, either pay the farmer based on the quality right there in cash, or then push the payment out to the farmers through mobile money or bank transfer into individual farmer accounts or group accounts the same day, the same month, at the end of the season. It really depends on your value chain and your approaches. Back in the system, we can manage credit. I had mentioned that already. So you can, as a company, and a lot of exporters do that, invest in the farmers to make sure that they apply the right fertilizer to increase productivity, to basically assign chemicals to make sure that the farmers use only approved chemicals so you don't have issues with MRLs at the end in the European market. So you can manage this input distribution, the stocks, and then also the repayment for all these services from the farmers. And you can also link, and this is what I also mentioned initially, use all the data to now de-risk loans for financial institutions. So we are partnering specifically here in Kenya with quite a few banks that are willing to now take over this financial burden or the credit by having data on which they can now basically, or verifiable data that they can use for this assessment of credit limits and lines. As a company, you can manage all your feed activities, so all the different standards can be uploaded and filled in, and then reports auto-generated or directly fed into the different platforms of the regulatory bodies. You can have feed inspections, baseline surveys, implement training programs. You can integrate the soil testing equipment to really generate valuable production advice to your farmers. Send SMS with weather forecasts and more. Then inventory management that goes outbound and inbound, so from the factory as seedlings, fertilizer, chemicals to the farmers, fully transparent, traceable, and accountable. And then once the farmers deliver at the bottom from the field to the factory, you know exactly when you have how many kilos in stock of what, to whom you owe how much money, what the quality is that you received. So it's all basically a very transparent flow. So basically what we offer is a system to our clients that has a mobile app in the center of data collection that runs fully offline. It's an Android-based solution and a desktop application that has the data hosted in the cloud. We sign data protection agreements with the client, so the data belongs to them and we will just only host it. We're only the custodians basically. We can integrate with different hardware, with financial software for payments, but also for credit facilitation. We can integrate with services from weather forecast to automated production advice, mapping features to then allow for carbon programs and much more. And in market linkages and compliance, and this is what's bringing us back to why we are here, with different standards also for the EU, whether it's the Global Gateway, whether it's the EUDR, the CSRD, and more. Great. So that is now my presentation. And while eProd captures, and I hope that what came out from my presentation, this critical first mile data, it still needs to travel, right? With the product all the way to Europe or to its destinations. And this is now where Yalma comes in. Let me stop sharing and hand over to Yalma so he can explain you how his processes and the flow goes.
Thank you, Almut. Sorry. Hello, I'm Almut Van Casteren. I'm the founder and owner of Cargo Ledger, and we build digital trust infrastructures for trade, supply chains, logistics, and we help our customers with a trusted chain of custody that replaces paper, reduces disputes, and makes compliance faster and easier with easy-to-use friendly software. From order to invoice and all data and documents in between. We have a local entity, Cargo Ledger East Africa, so we're serious about Kenya and East Africa, not just passing through. And on the international side, we are working with part of Result, which is a funded research initiative backed by the Port of Rotterdam and several universities and the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure, focused specifically on digitizing fresh produce from Kenya to Europe and the UK. And we are already piloting this corridor, working with TWIN, TLIP and eProd, tracking fresh produce from Kenya from field to export. You can see my screen? Yes. Yes, so this is us. And together with eProd, we are basically providing a farm to fork solution where eProd organizes the intake at the farm, helping their customers, farmers, with digitizing their operations, and then they harvest the goods, which is also supported by the software, and the intake at the collection point, and from there we can basically take it over and then export, organize all the events, all the moments of handover, all the documents, and even up to the proof of delivery in Europe. That's what we do. So this is making it even more clearer. If you look at what the problems exporters are facing. There are a lot of fragmented smallholders, a lot of paperwork involved. Biocompliance is becoming more and more complex and difficult, as was stated earlier, and also, losses and disputes take up a lot of time. If you then this makes digital no longer a nice to have. The compliance, the complexity of the compliance, also the cost pressure, and the speed of delivery. That is more and more important. And where exporters then lose money is at the handover gaps. So then there are disputes. Do I have the right documents that need to accompany the goods from to the next point? Is this person good for his money? What have you? Visibility delays, no insight in when something is coming to your warehouse or to your pack house, and no insight where after that where it's going. Now, document chasing is taking and versioning of that is complex and with paper, and claims and reconciliation is also
Are you moving
Yes.
your slides? Because I still
Yes.
am on the first page.
okay.
Yeah, now I see something. But well, I'm back at the first slide.
Okay, then I'll. Okay, that's this works then.
Yes, that works.
Okay, now shall I start again, or should I? I'll just continue. Sorry about that. Okay, this is the compliance, cost pressure, speed is important. Okay, where are exporters losing money? The handover gaps, visibility delays, document chasing, and all kinds of claims and reconciliation. What we then do with our chain of custody, with our software and the docs timeline, we can basically pick it up at the dispatch order, bring it to the gate, follow the load on the ship, and then the arrival in Europe or wherever, and then deliver all the documents as well as the invoice of the packing list, all certificates that are required, bills of lading, customs declarations, and the proof of delivery. So an integrated solution together with eProd from farm to fork, and all everything in between. This the business outcomes, so fewer losses, faster reconciliation, easier audits, improved buyer trust, and better margins, also mentioned earlier by Almut. And specifically our solution, we provide secure digital way bills, e-proofs of delivery, and the customs documents, but also real-time info between parties involved in the supply chain. We integrate with EU customs and also with Kenyan and Eastern Africa authorities via TLWIN and TLIP. We are part of the result program that I mentioned, which is digitizing moving the fresh produce from Kenya to the EU, end-to-end traceability with these partners. So, and ready to pilot for this. So as I mentioned, digital, then the unified solution between our parties, and what we then each of us does is basically eProd provides from farm to field, packhouse quality control and lots, and we then support all the logistical events, the document packing, and provide the chain of custody. Yeah, we're ready to pilot, and you can start small, but scale fast. So that's basically so that fits very well in what also Christoph mentioned earlier. So thank you. That's my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, and we can take it from there.